Welcome back to episode 2 of Wrestling with Kayfabe. Your boy Papa Schro here with my man EDJ.
DEJ?
My fault. Heel turn.
We're still in the heel turn.
hasn't went back face yet. What's going on, man?
Not much. A lot of stuff to unpack.
Absolutely. It's been a minute since we've been sitting here.
I know. Draft came out. And I think came out is the best word. This is really just a list of people who are changing their day.
Yeah, I think it's so funny because we talked a little bit about the draft on the first episode, and now for the draft to have happened, I think that's funny because I feel like WWE just fumbles this every time.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you're going to do a draft, like, I think of the original... I guess both of the original drafts when you think of Ric Flair and Mr. McMahon and Shane McMahon versus Stephanie McMahon on the last draft. And
yeah.
They had their, I think they called them commissioners, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
It was the GM and the commissioner. So
mm-hmm.
I think there's somewhat of a fumble. It might as well have been called a superstar shakeup like they did, previously. Which I didn't like, but at the same time, it's better than this. It's better than just rattling off names saying this guy's going here, this girl's going here.
Yeah, it didn't really make sense to me from a story standpoint, just because if it's draft, then call it, make it a draft. And, or at least announce the picks like you hadn't made up your mind backstage,
Right. Absolutely.
I don't know. It didn't make a lot of sense to me, but
there's a whole. My bad to cut you off, but there's a whole model there from every other sport.
Right.
Every other sport puts on a good draft, and it's not for. I mean, it's for television, but at the same time, like it's a draft to be a draft. Like
right.
The NFL draft is entertaining because it's the NFL draft. They're not going out there to necessarily put out entertainment like WWE should be doing. And maybe that's why they fumble it every time.
I mean, it could be, but they've done a good draft before. I mean, back when they did the lottery draft, and it would just, do that video and the rock music and all that. Yeah. And that was interesting in its own way, because you never really knew.
When they would have the match, and say Raw wins, Raw gets a random pick.
And you got, I think you got John Cena on Raw from that.
Mm-hmm.
You got, I think you got Batista on SmackDown from that. So, I mean, a lot of big changes in their career. I mean, that was the change of John Cena, becoming a half and half guy moving from SmackDown to Raw.
It's shown the draft can push people to the stratosphere.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, I liked some of the aspects of the draft. When they drafted the Bray Wyatt to Raw, they didn't announce Alexa Bliss at first, and I was like, well, that's really stupid. You're just going to end the story.
Right.
But luckily, they drafted her to Raw, so that continues. And I mean, that's in its whole self a really great story. AJ Styles to Raw, which What Culture brought up a McIntyre versus AJ Styles match, which I wasn't thinking about, but I'm thinking about now, and I'm all in on that.
Absolutely.
But that raises the question, do you let Randy Orton lose 4 times in a row on a pay-per-view?
That's tough. I think that if anyone can handle it, though, Randy Orton could handle it. I think that he'd, be all right, but that absolutely does push him way out of the top of the card.
And and it just kind of, and another part of it is it just kind of discriminates Keith Lee, because I mean you've had Orton and him basically tie a bunch, so I mean if you let Orton lose again, then that makes Keith Lee look weak, because he can't beat a guy that's lost 4 championship matches in a row. So I don't feel like there's much more McIntyre can do with it at this point, other than wrestle AJ Styles, but then you have to let AJ Styles win, because theoretically AJ Styles is the better wrestler. So, do you not... Or do you do... But you can't do Orton AJ, because I think that's even more towards the favor of AJ, even though they're kind of both the same age. So I guess that would kind of play in. I don't know. I mean, you could do Orton AJ, but I think a lot of people would expect AJ to win the first match.
Yeah, I would rather see... You know, if you're going to book towards McIntyre, AJ Styles, I would say it would be more beneficial for Orton to lose a title match rather than lose to AJ Styles in like a number one contenders match.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I'd be okay with that because, you know, if AJ just finds a way to win, it's different than him just beating Orton in general. And I think you could potentially, you know, make Orton kind of like his last resort in a way. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised they didn't move him to SmackDown at this point. Because, I mean, then you take away that, and then you put him against Reigns and potentially turn Orton face. But then again, you can't do that because Edge is going to come back.
I like the idea that you said to take him to SmackDown with Orton. I think that it's kind of hard to... I mean, what do you do with him right now? I think from a booking standpoint, it is hard to book a guy like Randy Orton because, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, he's on the same level as like a John Cena or something like, you know, a guy like that that's a part-timer still wrestling full-time.
Well, it's hard because it's obvious where his story is going to go once somebody returns. So I think they're really confused as to, you know, like, how do we put him in a situation to where he can still be towards the top, but still have to wrestle the person that's injured when they come back? Because that's what it's going to be. I mean, Edge can't come back and wrestle, you know, John Morrison. He has to come back and wrestle Randy Orton. That's the whole point of the payoff. So...
At that point, really, it's just kind of keeping Randy Orton relevant in the top of the card until Edge returns.
But I think a lot of people feel like Orton will get the title, and it'll be Edge and Orton either Mania or... Well, I guess Mania is the next biggest one at this point. Or Survivor Series.
Or the Rumble.
But, you know, I feel like... I think
it's got to be a WrestleMania match,
that rivalry wouldn't pay off at Rumble or Survivor Series. But yeah, they've got a lot of different things they can go back and forth on. I think the Banks Bailey is interesting. I didn't mind the finish that they had at SmackDown. I know a lot of people wanted it to be a bigger payoff at a Hell in a Cell, but it kind of makes sense. Just because at that point, you're more or less just adding to the rivalry, because now Bayley has to face Sasha and she can't disqualify herself. So I think it was actually a good story. I think some people disagreed with it, but now it makes sense because now Bayley has to win or lose. There's no, you know, out for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the way it's going with I mean, like we said on the first episode of this podcast, it's gotta be a knockdown drag out. These are former best friends that came to blows, and you know they built that up, teasing us with it for so long. I mean, it feels like it's been 5 years, you know, like between, are they going to turn on each other? They're not going to turn on each other.
Well, they did once, and then it was just disregarded because it wasn't that great.
It was like that time that they killed off Brian, and then he was back next week on Family Guy. Yeah. But, which, I don't know, WWE cracks me up with the times that they decide to kind of tread lightly, and then other times when they're like, "Oh, pull the trigger now." Yeah. You know, like it's time to go. Like, but I think right now is the perfect time, and I think the ups and downs that we were watching with Simon Miller, I think you kind of hit it right on the head. I think that a main event at Hell in a Cell would be perfect for them too, and I think that. Me personally, I think that you could definitely sell that as the main event. I know you've got Uso and Reigns matching up again, which is a big match.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's hard not to make that the main event, just because the story there. But the story there is somewhat, I mean, it's family compared to, like, your best friend.
Right.
Somewhat the same.
Right.
But it being an I Quit match, like, to me, I just think, like, that's got to be last.
Yeah, you can't have that be the co-main event. Because, I mean, there's so much, because that match is going to go, 30 minutes probably.
Absolutely. 30, 45,
and it's going to be absolutely brutal. So, I mean, you can't...
You're going to be worn out after it. You can't... I think that the only way that works is if you have that match, then have a filler match in between, then the main event. Yeah. Like, it's the co-main event, but not really the co-main event. Because you got to give, the viewer time to kind of, okay, collect myself and be like, okay, now I'm ready for Bayley and Sasha.
I don't know, but I feel like for me that if you have that cool off match like we talked about, it just kind of deteriorates the fact that you've got I think it sells itself because you've got a heated main event with, like we've said, two people that used to be friends and now they're not. I think it really hits the home that it doesn't have to be, Roman and Uso and then Big E and, Sheamus. It can be, and then Bayley Banks.
Right.
I think it's at that point to where people were hot and then they'd get... But at the same time, there's no fans right now. So I think that theory of, getting them to cool off doesn't matter. So you can stay as hot as you want the whole time.
Yeah, you know what? You've got a good point with that. I feel you. Because... I mean, I feel like, the cool-off is more so for fans in attendance than it would be for you watching at home. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. But I think you're right. I mean, like, both of these matches, it's funny because both of those matches are huge, big implications, and then you've got Orton McIntyre.
Right.
I feel like I'm just not invested in that hardly at all anymore. It's like it's been dragged on. With the Keith Lee, and I mean, I think that they've done a good job at, like we were talking about, they're trying to get to Orton Edge. We're waiting on Edge, and I think they've done a good job of kind of creating something there that, out of nothing essentially to get us to that point. But I just don't know. I'm ready to see McIntyre with somebody else.
Right. And I mean, that would look like, if he wins the Sunday, it'd probably be AJ Styles.
Yeah.
You would think.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, who doesn't want to see that?
Or Fiend now, with Fiend coming on Raw. Maybe the Fiend steps into that. I think that he's kind of intertwined with his
You could, but I was trying to think about that the other day. I think if Orton loses, it'll be Fiend and Orton immediately.
Okay.
Because then, or if Orton wins, but you can't have Orton lose the title before Edge comes back.
Right. Absolutely.
So.
And do we know what the timetable on Edge is?
He's probably got 3 months left, probably.
I guess I'm not. What is the injury? I'm not 100% sure.
It's a torn pec.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I mean, that's not the worst, but it's not great.
Yeah, I think they said 8 months at the beginning. Which, I mean, it could be longer than that, it could be shorter than that, but he's also, older, so it probably will be 8 months.
And I like the Edge-Orton rivalry, but I feel like, for me personally, like, I'm biased on that whole rivalry just because those are two people I feel like I never really cared for. Edge, definitely. I've never been like all in on the Edge character essentially, but I mean Orton has had great spans, but I think there's just kind of like, there's just wrestlers out there you're like, I mean, I know he's a really good wrestler and he's great, and there's a lot of a lot of fan support behind him, but just kind of one of those. It's like, man.
Right. I mean, for me, those two are probably in my top 5. And it's hard to beat Edge from a psychological standpoint. It's hard to beat Orton just from a flat-out skill point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when Orton is motivated, Orton may be the best guy on the roster.
Right. I mean, it's a natural thing for him. But he's also got to be in a rivalry that he likes. But I don't think he's been in any that he doesn't like yet. At least this year.
Right. Recently, yeah.
But I think if he loses again, which I can't see him losing again. I just don't think that's the best way to handle that. So, I mean, I don't know. I can't see him losing again, because then I think you would get a person who is not interested in anything you sell him at that point. Even if it is, Bray Wyatt, or even if it is, AJ Styles, which they have had matches in the past, and they could again. But I don't know. I don't think you could sell Orton on anything at that point.
Yeah, I think this is difficult. In the situation, I think WWE's kind of booked themselves into a corner with this.
Yeah, they have.
Absolutely, because you would like to see McIntyre continue that reign, but again, it is hard to, because then with Orton, if he loses this again, and if we're trying to set up for an Edge Orton WrestleMania with a title on the line, I mean, there's not much time really when you think about it. I mean, to do things naturally,
right?
If that makes sense, to set that back up. Because I think at this point, really, probably the best idea is, if Orton loses this, we're already in October.
Yeah, okay, so
he's got to get the belt by December, January, and then I guess maybe hope Edge is back to win the Rumble.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe that might be the best way to set that up. Maybe Edge comes out late in the Rumble and, oh my God, he's back, type of thing. And
I mean, they could, but would you really do an Edge return to the Rumble again, though?
Yeah, because that was the same story from, what was that,
last year.
Oh, was that last year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was thinking of when he faced Jericho. He came back to win the Rumble because he came back quick.
That was 11.
Yeah, I want to say
12 or 11.
26, WrestleMania 26?
Yeah, 12 or 11.
Because 27 would have been his last.
Yeah.
Against Del Rio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know exactly what their plan is with that or how they're going to make it work. Maybe an Elimination Chamber match. They usually kind of do an Elimination Chamber for the brand that's not a number one contender, for the brand that's not got the Rumble winner.
That'd be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also, you're putting a lot of risk on him getting re-injured in that match, though.
Absolutely. But anytime the Edge goes out there, because I don't know, I guess I haven't heard too much about, when Edge came back, and I wasn't paying too much attention around that time anyways, to wrestling. But, from my understanding, when he retired, he's an injury away from not walking again. Is that still the case with his neck?
I don't know. I think from what I've heard, that surgery was basically a massive success.
Okay.
So he, I think he's in the same boat as Bryan was, to where he doesn't have to worry about that as much as he did.
I'm still almost in shock that he came back, in general, just because of the ending of his career and all of that around that Alberto Del Rio after he won that ladder match, I think, at WrestleMania 27. Mm-hmm. And then the next night on Raw, he announced that he was retiring. But just to be gone for so long, that was what, 2012?
Yeah.
So, you're gone for almost 8 years and then return out of nowhere. I'm still just somewhat in shock that he even came back in the first place. Because this was a pretty brutal match at Mania that they had.
Yeah, it was. But, I think he felt like he wasn't done. But he had to be.
Absolutely. And, he didn't get to retire on his own terms.
No. Yeah.
And he wasn't done. He was the World Heavyweight Champion when he retired. Right.
Yeah, that's... I think that'd be hard for anybody to, realize that they can't retire when they don't want to retire.
Right.
But for them, I don't know. But I'm glad that he's back. But they've got to be careful, just because he's obviously much older than he was.
Mm-hmm. The beard shows it.
The beard shows it. But I mean, he had 2 matches and he tore his pec.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to worry about. So I think that's probably why you won't see him until the Rumble.
Right. At least.
Because that gives him as minimum time as possible.
Right.
And people will buy into him. It's not like they won't buy into him.
Absolutely. Well, and even what I was just saying, like how, Edge has never been... I mean, he's a top-level guy, just not very interesting to me personally. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, when he came back, I was like, oh shit, Edge is back? Like, what? What is going on? Like same thing. I mean, like I said, I'm still shocked that he even came back in the first place. That we mentioned Daniel Bryan in that, kind of a side note. How happy do you think WWE is to have let him come back to in-ring competition and stuff? Because remember, like a year before that happened, he had was tweeting like when his contract ends that he was gonna go wrestle somewhere else, that they wouldn't let him wrestle. Now with AEW popping up, I mean, just imagine like if he was over there, he would probably be, I mean, easily in the top guys over there.
Yeah, I mean, probably 1A or 1B.
Absolutely.
Because you've got Moxley, you've got Jericho, and you've got, if he goes over there, you've got him.
That's a main event scene right there.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and you've got, guys like MJF and, a couple other guys that are growing themselves into those roles.
And now they've got Rusev over there. I can't remember his name.
Miro, I think.
Miro, yes.
Yeah. And you've got him over there too, but I think he's more of an upper mid right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, I mean, I feel like that's all WWE's fault. They could have made him a superstar, I think.
I don't know. I never liked his moveset. I felt like it was...
Okay. Yeah.
Very, I know Cena gets a lot of flack for that, but I feel like it was very, 10 moves, all his matches kind of went the same. I don't know. I mean, obviously, that's their booking, but at the same time, I feel like he could have done more in his career there.
He just knows how to get the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
He's very good at getting the crowd behind him. The whole Rusev Day thing,
and that was interesting how he was,
and even playing the foreign heel.
Right.
I enjoyed him playing that heel role. I thought that was very entertaining. And then at the time, like when he first burst onto the scene with him and Lana, I mean, I think that was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
The way that they did all that, I really enjoyed them, but. Anyways, we got way off topic of what we're talking about.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were just talking about the draft in general, but
right.
Bliss and Wyatt talk about a perfect matching story-wise. And I think that's brilliant that, they realize... I think they've told the Wyatt story as well as they can for this point at where he's at. And it's normally, I think, his biggest crutch when he was in WWE the first time, or as Bray Wyatt, was that they had the plan and then they never really got it back. But to me, at this point, I don't think you can book him more perfectly than they have. Other than giving him a title and just letting him run with it. But then you just kind of book yourself into a hole if you do that.
Yeah, I agree with you, because losing it to Goldberg, that was awful. That was not the right thing to do at all.
Because Strowman won the title. So, I mean,
right.
I think what their theory was is that they wanted Braun to go, or Wyatt, to look stronger. So they felt if he lost to Strowman at WrestleMania, it'd make him look weaker.
Well, and the original plan was Roman, though.
Right.
Roman Reigns was supposed to come in and take the belt off of Goldberg.
Right.
So, I mean, I feel you on that, and not give him a loss at WrestleMania. I really love what they did at WrestleMania with him and Cena. But I mean, I feel you. But I think putting the belt on him in the first place was probably at the time the wrong thing to do. If you're willing to like get behind him for maybe 9 months to a year or something to have a title run, I'm all on board with that. But I do feel you. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why Undertaker only had 3 title reigns in his entire career. I mean, he only had a handful of title runs, and I think that's why you kind of book yourself into a corner. I think we kind of talked about that on the last episode of the bigger you go, the harder it is to sell the loss of whoever it may be. But I think thinking about talking about that whole story of going into WrestleMania 36, I think that it was what a great, obviously not at the time seeing such a great thing, but the pandemic actually really helped Roman Reigns, because he definitely would not be in this position without that. Without him opting out of WrestleMania, he would have went over as a babyface over Goldberg, and it would have been another same thing like when he beat Undertaker. And I don't think anyone would have been very receptive to that, because it's like, okay, here you are pushing Roman Reigns in my face again, and now it's very organic with him coming back as a heel. And
I mean, I think it probably would have happened either way, but they would have had to find a different way to tell it.
Right. So, he would have turned heel during his run, probably.
So, I mean, they couldn't have had a more perfect scenario, like you said, to have that happen. Because now he can just, he did the best return he could as a heel, and just beating the hell out of everybody.
What's his shirt say?
Wreck everybody and leave.
There you go.
I mean,
it works.
It works.
I like it.
Yeah, it works. But I mean, I feel like if you put him by himself, it doesn't work. But putting him with Paul Heyman, makes it feel bigger than it is.
It adds that legitimacy to. Yeah, absolutely.
But I do like that they're letting him speak more than they let Lesnar speak, which was hardly ever. But I think, letting Roman speak more, because he can speak on the mic, but you have to...
As long as you're not giving him lines like suffer and succotash.
Yeah, you have to be careful with what you give him. Because, I mean, when he went basically more or less unscripted against Cena, it did not go well for him.
You know what? I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That was... I remember that, just thinking, wow, this dude really... they let Cena just go out and, fuck this dude up on the mic.
Yeah. I mean... I see why people, don't necessarily, or have not necessarily liked Cena, but I always have. And it's hard to argue with the fact that he is not easily one of the best, if not the best ever on a microphone.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. John Cena is where he's at because of how talented he is. And whether you like it or not, I mean, he is one of the most talented wrestlers. I mean, he is the Hulk Hogan of his generation. Absolutely. Yeah. There's no argument from me. I've never, I guess I won't say I've never been a Cena fan, but through his whole Super Cena run, not the biggest fan, but also enjoyed what he did. Right. If that makes sense. I wish that he would have had a heel turn in there somewhere. But, whatever.
I think they basically let the heel turn be a natural thing. Because I know that for them, the fans... I think they knew the fans were going to do that either way. It's kind of like when... basically CM Punk. I mean, CM Punk didn't necessarily turn face. The fans just turned that way.
Right.
And they realized, we can run with this and let him be a face now.
Well, and yeah, a lot of guys, Stone Cold, The Rock,
right.
A lot of guys got into that heel role and got over with the fans so much that, okay, now now you're a babyface, essentially, because you've gotten over so well, even though you were supposed to be a heel.
Right. Cena was a half and half, but he's more of the time a face than a heel. But I think for most people, they always wanted that superstar heel. But you had superstar heels when Cena was a face.
Well, and when you think about it, like the way you put it there, now thinking back to his character before he really was full blown, I mean, that's really what got him over originally. He was a heel,
Right.
Well, that's interesting thinking about that, just because I haven't thought about that in, just that era of, mid-2000s Cena that was, basically a heel. Right. And that's essentially what got him over to be this big superstar. I guess, yeah, I get it. And I get the whole, you want to be a role model and don't want to go heel because of that. And I get that to a point. But as you were saying, there's other superstar heels out there. I mean, you always had Orton to go against. Edge.
I mean, yeah. Edge.
Umaga.
I know Kane during that time. I mean, there were a lot of different ones that he could have easily, and he did, rival with. Mm-hmm. So it's not like the barrel was empty of heels. And probably some of the better heel work was during Cena's big, face run. Mm-hmm. CM Punk was still a heel at the time. Edge. Well, I don't know. Edge was kind of back and forth during that time. Triple H was a heel kind of at that time.
Edge was, Triple H, absolutely. Yeah. Edge was more like at the beginning of the whole, Cena huge mega push. Right. Because the way that they played that with, that was game changing. That was Edge is the first guy to ever cash in Money in the Bank, the way he did. And, I guess, was he the first Money in the Bank winner ever?
Yeah, he was the first one.
Okay, yeah, that was the first one. But I just remember that being so shocking when he came in to cash that in.
Read it on their website. Because that's back in the day when they had, literally, if you didn't watch the pay-per-view, that's where you went. You went to their website to see what happened. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wait, what?
Right, how is he the champion?
What do you mean he's the champion?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, because before that happened, we didn't even think of the possibility of it. No. Right after a match, you can be like, oh, I'm going to cash this in now. Cena's half dead in the ring, covered in his blood. Let me cash this in.
I mean, and I think that shows his intelligence of the wrestling world. Because everybody else thought that was a terrible idea.
Right.
Because it had never been done before. But I mean, that's what do you? I mean, it's obviously foresight now, but what are you talking about? That was brilliant.
Right.
I mean,
and then the whole for years they called him the ultimate opportunist. Yeah. It was just this whole thing that. Yeah, absolutely an amazing idea, in retrospective.
Right. But, I mean, here's my thing. If you get all these wrestling matches right at Hell in a Cell, you've got to let Bayley win. I don't think you let Sasha win, but fortunately I think she is going to win. Because it literally just kills everything that Bayley's worked for. At this point,
I think you can go both ways on that match, personally. Just because I think with Bayley, character-wise, if she loses, I like the idea of thinking, of her being that bitter heel, of being obsessed with the belt, and then, I think eventually, the end point of this rivalry, I think you are right, Bayley kind of has to...
Right.
Take it all together. I think you could maybe do it in a way where maybe Sasha gets her, but then again, I don't know about that. Talking it through, because then it's just another 2-month reign from Sasha, and I don't want to see that.
That's the thing. If you give Sasha the title, you have to let her run with it. You can't let her do the same thing she's always done. So don't waste the time. Let her give a valiant effort. But lose. And then let Bayley lose to somebody else. And then if you want to put Sasha against that person, you can. But I think at this point you have basically concluded that Bayley is almost unbeatable. And she's the longest reigning SmackDown champion. Or Women's SmackDown champion. So don't ruin that by giving it back to Sasha, who you're probably going to take it away from in like 3 weeks.
Yeah, because even her Raw Women's Championship run was over like that, you know? Right. I mean, how long was she champion? A couple weeks?
I think so. Which it didn't make... I understand why they did it, just for psychological reasons, you know, to prolong the story of them splitting apart. But you didn't have to give her the Raw Women's Championship. Right. You didn't have to give her that, because then it just ruins Asuka. Right. Her run.
Absolutely.
Because then what are you going to do with her? And you just gave it back to her. So what's the point of doing that if you're just going to give it back to her?
Yeah, and I feel like with title runs, like me personally, I feel like I definitely have a very old look at it, an old school approach to it is, you know, like you don't just bounce the title around.
I mean, Triple H had runs as WWF champion thing that lasted months.
Absolutely. John Cena's runs. I mean,
it was almost, 2 years?
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's got, like, a cumulative between, like, all of his runs, he's got, like, years worth of, you know, thousands of days. I mean, I think it's, like, 1,200 days or something like that.
Hogan's runs. Bruno Sammartino's runs.
And it can still work in 2020. CM Punk proved that, you know, 5 years ago. Yeah. I mean, it's proven that can still work, and that just legitimizes the belt, you know, to me. I think that because I think anytime that you start bouncing around the title, it somewhat illegitimizes it. At least if it's too quick and too much.
Right.
I think that there's a way you can kind of do that, but especially when it's like, take for example the Charlotte and Sasha Banks, where they just bounce back the title back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and I think even maybe that can work, but I just don't like the constant. I mean, they changed the title between each other like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
In the span of like months, like it wasn't over like a year or anything like that. It was over months, so I don't know. I just don't like when they decide to bounce the title around like that.
Well, I mean, Charlotte is one of those people who's probably going to get almost whatever she wants.
Yeah.
You know, when she won the NXT title, why? You know, why? You know, it didn't make sense.
Right, because that was recent.
Yeah, that was the last WrestleMania.
Yeah.
You know, she basically beat up Rhea Ripley, who was super hot, you know, at the time.
Right.
And it didn't make sense. But it also didn't make sense for her to go after any other title either.
Right.
So, I don't know. If you were going to have her wrestle Rhea Ripley, let Rhea Ripley win.
Right.
And then just let Charlotte go on and do something else.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Allegedly, she was promised a lot of things that she hadn't gotten yet, and blah, blah, blah.
I think that it's really weird when they kind of mix NXT with the main roster. And I know NXT's kind of been bolstered up to where it's like they're supposed to be on par.
Right.
I hadn't watched Survivor Series probably about a month ago-ish. I went and watched last year's Survivor Series. I didn't realize that they added NXT to Survivor Series. And I like that. I guess I don't dislike the idea. I'm not in love with it. Just because I like how NXT is kind of like its own thing. And especially the fact that they had a takeover the night before. Mm-hmm. And then so now all of these people that are coming in, you know, with NXT to the main roster pay-per-view, it's like, okay, you just had a hellacious night last night.
Right.
And now you're in, you know, which is a kind of a prove it thing, which is cool because, you know, these are supposed to be the up and comers and stuff, but I don't know, I just don't like saying what were we just talking about? Going back to Charlotte winning the NXT title. You know, it's like taking a step back.
Mm-hmm.
In my eyes, like, and that's not to put down the NXT brand at all, but just like a Charlotte Flair, like that'd be like John Cena being like, I want to. I mean, I know that's kind of like fabricating a little bit Charlotte Flair, but she's supposed to be on that level. You know, she's supposed to be one of the top women in WWE, and for her to be like, I'm gonna challenge the NXT champion, like, I mean, what do you gain out of that? You know,
right? Yeah, I mean,
you're facing somebody that's perceived to be under you.
Right.
There's no gaining in that situation.
Yeah, I think they just kind of booked themselves to the point of no return on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, she came in at the Royal Rumble and basically eliminated everybody.
Ripley?
No.
Charlotte.
Well, Ripley did too, but Flair.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have her challenge for, like you said, a perceived lesser title. You know, so if you're going to let her eliminate 8, 9 women, then have her challenge for SmackDown and Raw.
Right.
But I think, you know, they wanted Becky to, you know, finish it out before, you know, she got pregnant or couldn't wrestle anymore. Because I'm pretty sure she probably told them that she was going to stop wrestling at some point to become pregnant.
Right.
So I think they probably knew that. But I don't know. But now, if Becky comes back at some point, which I'm sure she might, what do you do with her?
Man. I mean, I think that's tough and a very good question because, I mean, I think that she kind of comes back and just takes her role back on Raw. I mean, I think that's the best thing to do with it because, like, with Asuka, like, you know, same thing like you said. Sasha winning that kind of fucks Asuka up in my eyes. And, I mean, they fumbled her a long time ago, really.
Right.
And I don't know. Like, it's tough to say at this point Becky Lynch can lose to anyone, essentially.
Right.
Because, I mean, she left on top, gave up the belt.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, when she comes back immediately, she has to challenge for the title.
Right, because it's the title she never lost. Mm-hmm. And blah, blah, blah.
Unless there's something better there for her, maybe. Maybe her and Ronda come back at the same time.
I don't think they're going to bring Ronda back.
I don't think they're going to bring Ronda back at all. I don't think Ronda's going to come back.
No.
It is more of... Because I think WWE would take her back in a heartbeat. I mean, that's ratings.
Right.
I thought that was interesting when I was looking at the WWE draft. She was listed as not in a drafting pool, but she was listed in there. And I mean, it's been almost 2 years now since we've seen Ronda in a WWE ring.
Yeah,
I thought that was interesting too. And that was, I think, CBS Sports was where I was reading that article. So I think that's interesting that she's still active, air quotes.
I'm sure she still has her contract.
Right.
But
I don't think that would be a bad idea. Say Becky Lynch comes back, goes and challenges, you know, is on the mic challenge, you know, saying, I never lost my belt, yada, yada, yada. Ronda comes from the crowd or something and, like, takes her out. Because, really, I mean, that would be kind of a line blur, right, if you will. Because then you're kind of like, because Ronda's whole issue was leaving in a big way was the crowd shifting on her and cheering for Becky. And she did not like that and thought that was disrespectful, but hey, Ronda, it's wrestling. Like, that is just how it works.
We all
know
she's not very good at losing.
Absolutely. And in that is kind of funny because, like, that, you can't blame anybody else but you.
Right.
You know, that's not a fight that you got knocked out or, you know, that's not a match that you lost. You lost the crowd. Like, right. And then you shitted on the crowd for losing them. I mean, which is perfect. We have a clear cut who we're booing. We have a clear cut who we're cheering. Right. We have a clear face, clear heel, and, you know, treat it that way. And then I think that would bring around, you know, I mean, these first 2 episodes have kind of been focused around heel turns. Us talking a lot about how, you know, fans are more receptive of a heel turn, and if you really embody that role, you know, you will win, you know, us over as fans.
Right.
And I think Ronda, that's perfect for her to come back, put her name out there, and just continue. Say, fuck all the crowd, fuck the WWE universe, and I'm gonna beat up Becky Lynch, and that gives you time to figure out what you're gonna do with the belt until obviously you're gonna have to put it on one of them, but
yeah, I see what you mean. I think that'd be a cool way to bring her back. You know, Becky Lynch on the mic is fantastic. You know, I think she can sell anything. You know, to come out on the mic and say, you know, I want my title back. You know, but first I feel like I have to finish business that wasn't finished, in my opinion. You know, I think that's how you bring Ronda back.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just surprising to me that someone didn't pull her aside and go, "You're missing this. You're missing what wrestling is.
Right.
You're now the heel. Just go with it."
Right. You're absolutely right, because that's not a bad thing. No. It's not necessarily a bad thing that, you know, the crowd turned on you. I mean, shit, look at Roman Reigns.
Right.
I mean, we're just now in 2020 really saying, like, okay, Roman, you know, like,
right.
It's taken all of that, and, you know, the people behind you, I mean, we've obviously kind of seen they're not the greatest at, you know, necessarily booking and writing, you know.
I mean, look at John Cena's whole career. And
yeah.
He had the biggest fan base in the world, and then half of it went away. So, if anyone was to tell Ronda, you know, I mean, this is good for you, it would have been him. But I also think he felt like she wasn't meant for the business.
Well, and that's a lot of it. I think that there's a lot of animosity with, you know, Ronda just even being there for real. Which, I don't know, I mean...
She didn't have bad matches.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. I'll never forget watching the WrestleMania match live and just being shocked.
Right.
I could not believe, one, that they let him go as long as they did,
right.
and two, how good she was and how great that match was. I'm talking about the Stephanie McMahon and Triple H versus her and Kurt Angle at was it 34? I think
30.
I think that's 34 in New Orleans.
Yeah.
So, man, I don't know what you do with Ronda, and I think that it's really funny between the MMA and the wrestling world how non-receptive of each other, like, those two communities are in America, or you know, on this side of the world. Meanwhile, you know, you go over to like Japan and they are happily swapping back and forth. Like, you see a real, you know, like an MMA fighter go to wrestling, and you know, Japan. Maybe vice versa.
I mean, well, for America to not like the same things, that's pretty par for course. Honestly.
Right.
But
I think it's funny how intertwined, though, the communities are, but then just are so against acknowledging that.
Right.
Essentially.
Right. Well, Joe Rogan, I think, is a big part of that. You know, he makes fun of wrestling all the time.
Yeah.
But he respects it. You know, he respects it, though. I think there's a lot of MMA fans that just don't respect it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same craft. You have to sell yourself.
Yeah.
You have to, you know, be in physical shape. In a lot of aspects, wrestling is tougher because they wrestle every single night.
Absolutely. It's an art. It's a dance, and just like fighting. I mean, fighting is a dance. And, you know, wrestling is absolutely an art. And like you said, yeah, it's 365 days a year. You may, you know, train all week and stuff, but, you know, you're only fighting 3 or 4 times a year.
Right.
And, you know, these guys and girls that wrestle, I mean, they go out there and they, you know, put it on the line every night. You know, and a main event type person may wrestle a 30-minute match, you know, twice a week, or, you know, something like that. And especially with the way that they've done pay-per-views, I mean, hell, having Backlash right after WrestleMania, having, what were the pay-per-views they just had, like, back-to-back? Was it SummerSlam and then Payback?
Yeah.
They had back-to-back weeks?
SummerSlam, yeah. SummerSlam and Payback.
I mean, that was insane.
Yeah. It didn't make sense. Really.
I don't know if they've ever I mean, can you ever remember back-to-back weeks having a pay-per-view?
No.
I mean, the only other time that I would think possibly is when you're doing, okay, this was a SmackDown pay-per-view and then a Raw pay-per-view.
Well, they used to have those filler pay-per-views, you know, I mean, like Over the Limit, even back in the 90s, I mean, Edge of Hell.
Right.
Just really random pay-per-views that didn't necessarily mean anything, but it was just to, you know, generate revenue.
Right. And progress stories.
Right.
I can't lie, though, in 2020, I can't stand that. I cannot stand, like, the Payback pay-per-view that you give me a week after SummerSlam that is just a glorified episode of Raw and SmackDown, essentially.
Yeah, but, I mean, I think it was 2 weeks after SummerSlam.
Okay, maybe, yeah.
But we got Roman back to have Payback, so, I mean,
fair enough.
Cool.
But I think if you want to do something like that...
we got him back at SummerSlam, sorry.
Yeah, but and then Payback, he won the title. But I think that, I don't know, if you just do stuff like that, I just think, like, why not... I don't know, why not figure out a way to either have, like, maybe a special or, you know, something like that. I guess it works as the same thing. I guess I'm just kind of complaining, really. I mean, it works the same way, you know, WWE Network's $10 a month.
Right.
You know, if you really want to watch it that bad, you can pay $10 and watch it.
Right.
That makes me think of, you remember when they, like, briefly brought Saturday Night Main Event back? Like, in the 2010s-ish, late 2000s.
I think it was earlier than that, because DX was still...
Yeah, I think you're right, too. That was like 06-ish.
It was like mid-2000s.
I can remember... Was that SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, maybe? I remember it being a, like, playable arena that was, like, impossible to unlock.
Yeah, I remember that.
But I remember that and just thinking that was super cool. It was really cool, and seeing it on, you know, NBC, it was network television, it was like, you know, you had to watch it. Yeah, because that first one that came back, I'm pretty sure was Spirit Squad versus DX, was like the main event.
Spirit Squad versus DX.
Yeah. What an interesting time in wrestling.
That was an interesting time. Dolph Ziggler came from Spirit Squad.
Yeah, I was just about to say, we got Dolph Ziggler out of that.
Kenny Dykstra.
Uh-huh.
I think that was it out of them that survived.
Yeah, pretty much. I can't really remember any of them. Anytime I think about them, I just think about all of them getting shitted on.
Oh, yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, literally, yeah. It's not like it was a bad idea to have them as a group.
No, not at all.
As a group, they worked.
I didn't even mind I thought it wasn't a bad idea of them all being male cheerleaders either, because it was just, that was perfect. You know, DX was here to crack jokes and, you know, knock heads, really. I mean, and that was perfect. You got male cheerleaders, that's a punchline right there, and now you've got a 5-on-2, you've got actual adversity for DX to overcome. But the Spirit Squad, that's hilarious.
I mean, they were all athletic.
Absolutely.
They were all fairly decent at what they did. I mean, obviously, again, you know, you got Dolph Ziggler coming out of that, who has, I feel like he should go somewhere else at this point of his career.
Yeah, this is such a weird up and down career. I've always really enjoyed Dolph Ziggler as a wrestler. I think he's a good wrestler, and I think that, you know, his selling is so good, and just the way he flops around the ring and stuff is just... He's kind of just an ode to one of those old school wrestlers, I think.
Right.
Kind of,
and he's very Shawn Michaels-esque.
Right.
In a way. I mean, not nearly as good as Shawn Michaels was, but, you know, just the general selling is really good. I mean, his athleticism is very... He's a better athlete than Shawn Michaels was. Because Shawn was more of a... He's an athlete, but he was a bruiser athlete. You know, he was more, even though he wasn't that big, he was a more physical guy. And Dolph Ziggler was more of a fire athlete than Shawn Michaels was. Not putting them on the same pedestal, because you can't.
Right.
But in a sense of being an athlete, I think Ziggler has that skill over Michaels.
I could definitely see that. Maybe some alternate universe, Dolph Ziggler's a 10-time champion and one of the best wrestlers in WWE. At one point,
Dolph Ziggler was super over.
Absolutely.
When he left Spirit Squad. It was with AJ and Big E.
Yeah, exactly. That was WrestleMania 29, the night after WrestleMania 29 when he cashed in on Del Rio. Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest moments in, Raw history, I think, really. I mean, the crowd, the pop, that he got from the crowd that night, I mean, that was insane. Great. I'm sure he, thinks back to that fondly.
I don't even remember who he lost the title to.
I don't either, honestly. But I remember that little run that he had. He probably dropped it back to Del Rio, to be real honest. I mean, and they were super big on Del Rio there for a while. Mm-hmm. I liked Alberto Del Rio. I think he was a good heel. Obviously, he just didn't really fit in.
And good wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
His lifestyle doesn't fit their motto anymore. Or they just didn't like him.
Is he still going to fight Tito Ortiz? Did you ever see that?
No. Well, yes, I did.
He's supposed to fight Tito Ortiz.
I really hope not.
Fun fact. Alberto Del Rio got knocked out by Mirko Cro Cop in Pride.
I didn't even know Del Rio actually tried his hand.
He fought with a mask on. Oh, an actual MMA fight with a mask on against Mirko Cro Cop. I mean, the fucking balls on that guy. Like, what? You walk into a fight with Cro Cop with a mask on. Good luck. But either way, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. I think, what do you think's going to go down at Hell in a Cell?
Well, I guess we'll wrap with predictions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, what's even the whole card? I don't even know. I guess we should probably look that up.
Pull it up real quick.
But I guess we'll go reverse order. Unfortunately, I think Banks is going to win. I think Roman wins easily. To me, I think Orton finally gets the win. It just makes sense if you're going to bring Edge back. He has to win this. And I think McIntyre has basically run as far as he can with this run. I think you take it off of him, let him build his way up to just a superstar without a title, and then give it back to him, turn him heel, and let him beat Edge, later on down the road. And just kind of let him be the mega heel champion.
Orton.
No, McIntyre.
Oh, so okay. Yeah. Turn him heel.
No, you let Orton beat McIntyre, then you let Edge beat Orton, then you let McIntyre beat Edge. And then
I don't dislike that.
Yeah, then McIntyre's the heel champion.
Mm-hmm. Damn. That's some very future booking.
It is future booking, but it makes sense.
Absolutely. And long-term booking is one thing that WWE just, refuses to do, I feel. Other than the 3 title matches that we kind of touched on, I kind of agree with you on all of them. I think that Sasha, man, I want to say that she'll win, but I kind of feel like
I want Bayley to win, but I think they're going to give it to Banks.
I just feel like they've been so wishy-washy on Banks that I feel like you have to go with Bayley if you're booking it just the way that they've booked Sasha.
Well, I don't really trust WWE with what they should do.
Right. I mean, I absolutely feel you because I think that. Yeah, you're right. I guess I'll say Sasha Banks too because I think that Bayley is kind of the obvious. She needs to go over to solidify her as that status as top of the line champion, and I don't think that they'll let her get away with that, if that makes sense. McIntyre and Orton, I like the idea of Orton winning, and obviously, like you kind of said right now, is kind of like it's the obvious time to pull the trigger. Mm-hmm. And for that makes me think McIntyre's definitely going to win. Right. And they're either going to draw this out longer and Orton will eventually win, or maybe McIntyre will win, Orton goes away for a while, and then eventually we see Orton resurface after maybe an AJ Styles feud, or maybe Styles takes the belt and Orton takes the belt from him, if they're still going to set up a title match for Orton and Edge, and maybe they're not ready to pull the trigger on that because they're uncertain about Edge, possibly. Mm-hmm. I think that's a definite possibility. And then Roman and Jay, I mean, Roman Reigns, I think, is obviously going to win that belt. Or keep the belt. Other than that on the card, Dominic Mysterio versus Seth Rollins versus Murphy. And I had assumed, I didn't actually know that Rollins and Murphy had split up. I'd kind of assumed it from what I had, when I'd been keeping up with it more about a month ago. It kind of looked like it was definitely going to go that way. Mm-hmm. Then with Rollins getting drafted to SmackDown and I hadn't heard anything about Murphy, I assumed that they were definitely split up. So that's an interesting triple threat match. Yeah, I would think you put Dominic Mysterio over in that match.
Or Murphy.
I think
you put Murphy in to solidify the split from Rollins. Because the storyline is Murphy can't win without Rollins.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting. So, that definitely makes me think that they'll be ganging up on Rollins. Mm-hmm. Maybe they have Rollins pull through it and win, to solidify him try to solidify him back at top of the card.
I think, and since we're doing, I would go with Murphy in that one. I feel like since Dominic Mysterio had his revenge.
Right. Also with Dominic, what's the plan with him? Is he an official roster member? Is he a wrestler?
Well, I mean, he's on the roster on SmackDown now.
Right. So, but just how in is he, I feel, I guess. Is really my right. thought.
He's been impressive.
Yeah, I like him. I guess I absolutely enjoy Dominic Mysterio, and I like the fact that him and his dad are together, and it's cool, and especially the time period we grew up watching wrestling. I remember the Eddie and Mysterio ladder match over.
Probably one of the most underrated stories ever.
Absolutely,
Guerrero and Mysterio, and it was such a good story.
Absolutely.
And Guerrero was such a good seller. And probably an underrated seller of stories.
Yeah. Eddie is definitely one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. In my opinion. Kevin Owens, Aleister Black is another one. Yeah. And I haven't... It looks like that's all that they have for the card right now. I'm sure there'll be plenty more.
I would assume those haven't been announced on TV yet.
Right.
But... I don't know what you do with Owens and Black at this point. I feel like story-wise, it doesn't really matter because they're on different shows now.
They both got drafted.
Yeah, you're right.
They both got drafted to SmackDown, right?
Right. So, I mean, I guess it does, yeah. So, if you want to keep pushing Kevin Owens, you let Kevin Owens win. I think he does win. But you kind of can't keep burying Aleister Black at this point.
Man, because especially with his NXT run, man, he should have been pushed very well. I think that it's very scary for NXT guys to move up to the main roster. Mm-hmm. I feel like WWE on the main roster almost treats NXT guys like they're coming from the indies.
Well, I mean, look at Finn Balor in NXT.
Right, and compared to, I mean, they tried to give him the Universal title and he got hurt, but at the same time, when he came back, he didn't even challenge for the belt.
Right.
The belt that he won and never lost.
Right.
Held for a day.
And now he's back in NXT.
Yeah. So
doing much better. But I think Adam Cole's going to get called up anyway. So.
Yeah. Probably. I like Adam Cole too. Yeah. And the whole Undisputed Era. Mm-hmm.
Which I was hoping that they were Retribution, but they were not.
Oh, yeah, that whole deal is quite interesting, I feel.
I mean,
Mustafa Ali ended up being the leader of them.
Which is okay.
Right.
But those 3 other individuals or 4 other individuals, whatever, are the most random group of wrestlers there are.
Yeah.
I mean, Shane Thorne, Dio Madden, I forget what the girl's name is. Obviously, they're not memorable.
I think it was a good try, but I think that they definitely failed miserably with that. And I think that it shows, like, you know, you can't just expect to throw some people together and for it to work. It works sometimes, but I think you have to have more of a thought process going into something like that, especially if you're going to build that up for months. I mean, that was a long build for the payoff to be.
And especially for it to be 4 people. I mean, what happened to the 30 people you had, you know, storm the ring a couple weeks ago in the same attire? You know, are they
right
too, or what?
Right.
So what does that mean?
And with Mustafa Ali, like you said, it's not a bad idea, but at the same time, I think for the leader to be him, I don't know if he's at the level that payoff was ever going to be just huge, you know? Whether it have been, you know, somebody coming back that's a huge star or, you know, like right there on the tip of being a huge star. I don't know. You know what would have been low-key and amazing? Guy to put at the head of that? Punk.
I was getting ready to say, you should probably see him Punk.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, how insane would that be?
I think they're still far away from getting him to come back.
Yeah, I don't know if he... I think that Punk trolls the fans more than anything. Just even him coming back on that, what was the talk show that they had?
Yeah, whatever it was on Fox, yeah.
Yeah. Even him coming back with that, I think, was just kind of like, I'm here, but I'm not here. Haha.
Well, I mean, he worked for Fox,
right?
For WWE,
right?
And I don't know. I think he could have.
But I think that shows that WWE's not against him returning.
No,
because they would have, if they did not want him on WWE programming, they would have told Fox, "Do not put that man on our, broadcast." Which they definitely would have been able to do. I mean, look at the UFC almost kind of in the same situation with Ariel Helwani. They had that big, deal when Brock Lesnar came back, and he's never been right with the UFC again. The UFC moves to ESPN, the same place where Ariel Helwani has his show. They're not really connected in any way, necessarily, other than they both are on ESPN with the UFC and Ariel Helwani. And I mean, he's always covered the UFC, so it's it's no different. So I mean, I definitely think that it's not like you see Ariel Helwani on post-fight coverage interviewing people or something like that. So I mean, I think WWE definitely could have said no to that if they didn't want that. But I think that WWE wants that door to be open just as much as maybe Punk or especially us fans want it to be open. But
well, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you?
Absolutely. I guess on that note, we kind of got through our predictions. To wrap this up, I will pose one more question to you regarding what we just talked about. Will we ever see CM Punk again in a WWE ring? Wrestling,
It's got to be for him the right amount of money. And 2, it's got to be the right person.
To feud with.
I think the best person for him to feud with when he comes back would be Edge.
Interesting.
Because you have to him and his character, everyone's praising this guy who's come back, who went away for so many years. Everyone's welcomed him back with open arms. Well, what about me? I had to do this and do that and do this and had to basically, quote unquote, beg to come back, but he just gets to come back. I think that's probably where you start him, and then you move him to, AJ next. I don't think you throw him in with AJ right away.
Man, that would be a hell of a match to see.
Right.
Him and AJ.
I think you hold off for that match. you tease that match because you don't just want to give people that match right away.
Mm-hmm.
Or you give them Daniel Bryan, former Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm.
That could be another one too. So one of those.
I actually really like the idea of Edge, them feuding just based off of that, because that brings Punk back with a huge chip on his shoulder, which we already know he definitely would have coming back. But then to add, play off of that in a story, I didn't get to leave as the world champion. I had to roll out of the ring in the Royal Rumble and never come back, and was told tough shit basically, and now here I am finally back after 5-10 years, whatever. So. But man, I think we got through a lot today. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Kind of a very sporadic show, the landscape of WWE. But we're your babyface host, Papa Schro, and our heel host, DEJ. There's been another episode of Wrestling with Kayfabe. We will see you next time.